series of spooky stories, anonymous submission. I used to work at this massive car auditing yard where trains would drop off thousands of vehicles. I mean, thousands, rows and rows of cars stretching as far as you could see. It was huge, like the size of an amusement park parking lot. My daughter worked there with me, but she was always late and I was always early. One morning around 5:30 a.m., it was still completely dark outside except for a few dim lot lights. I was walking alone through the aisles, auditing cars in the section labeled H. That's when I heard it. Mom? Mom, where are you? It was my daughter's voice, clear as day. I didn't think anything of it at first because that's exactly what she would do when she showed up late. She'd call out and try and find me. So I answered, I'm over in H. I turned around expecting to see her walking towards me, but there was no one there. Then I heard it again. Mom, where are you? This time it sounded off. I couldn't tell where it was coming from, so I called back louder. I'm in H. Where are you? If it sounded off, why did you respond? I kept scanning between the rows of cars trying to spot her, but nothing. No movements, no footsteps, no one. And then suddenly, right behind me, Mom, come here. My entire body froze. Every hair on my arm stood up. Instant goosebumps, pure terror. Because behind me wasn't the car lot. It was the train tracks. And just beyond that, thick woods, about 20 feet away. There was no reason for my daughter to be back there. None. And somehow I knew whatever just called me was trying to get me to go into those woods. I didn't wait to figure it out. I turned and ran. Full sprint across that massive lot all the way back to the office. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely dial my phone, but I called her immediately. She answered. I said, Ashlyn, where are you? She goes, I'm running late. I'm still on my way. I'll be there in about 20 minutes. My heart dropped in my stomach. What I heard was not her, but it was her voice. Exactly her voice. I never went back to that job again. Smart lady. To this day, I don't know what it was, but I know one thing for sure. Something out there was calling me, and it wanted me in those woods. The smartest decision that you ever could have made was to not go back to that job. I commend you, because there are a lot of people that would have went back. And I understand why people have to go back. It's not as simple as quitting and then going and finding another job, but it is a little bit. And who wants to take that fucking risk when something like that is trying to lure you into the woods? Rated on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most. My website, my app should be up soon, and I'm so excited to be doing long-form content. I'm dedicating more time to my content, and I cannot wait to share it with you. I just realized I had pepper in my teeth, so if you've seen it, no you didn't. See you in the next episode.
This is why you should keep your windows closed at night. Welcome back to the series where I tell true horror experiences submitted by you, the viewers. Today's viewer has requested to remain anonymous, but a big thank you for submitting your story. Honestly, after reading this experience, I low-key had a flashback to my own, and especially that dreaded feeling of being watched. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. Today's true horror experience takes place in North America, the USA. This all happened in my grandparents' cabin, located between Angel Fire and Eagle's Nest in New Mexico. We arrived at their cabin at around 10 p.m. We had left home much later than expected and were all pretty exhausted from the long journey, so after settling into our rooms, we all turned in for the night. It must have been between 12 to 3 a.m. when I was abruptly woken by what sounded like screaming coming from outside. The surrounding area was fairly isolated, with only about 5 other cabins in hearing distance, but even then the scream sounded strange. Not like a mountain lion's, which you would hear now and again, but also not quite human. I initially tried to brush it off and head back to sleep, but then I would hear it again and again, and each time something would change in its inflection, volume, and most concerningly, location, as it sounded like it was getting closer and closer towards the cabin. Well, somehow, against all the odds, I managed to fall back asleep, but not for long, as I found myself awake once again, no longer than an hour later, accompanied by the intense feeling of being watched. But the screams had now dissipated, and instead were replaced by the faint sound of breathing. All my hair stood on end, and my breath started to tremble as I slowly looked towards the source of the sound. And it was just then that I saw, looking through my window, the silhouette of what looked like a tall man. For some context, I was sleeping in a room where my window was right next to the front door, and usually I would keep it open for better airflow. But I guess that night I must have been too tired to open it, and thank God I didn't. So there I was, staring at this figure through my window as it stared back. I thought for a moment maybe I was seeing things like when you confuse a pile of clothes in your room for a monster, but that theory was quickly debunked when I saw it move. One single twitch. I honestly didn't know what to do, so I instinctively hid under my covers and prayed that the sun would rise soon. And luckily it did, no longer than a couple hours later. When I heard familiar footsteps in the hall outside, I immediately jumped out of bed and told my parents everything. The figure was of course gone, and my parents convinced that I must have been dreaming. Well, that's until we found something located outside my window. A dead coyote. Not close enough that you could see it at first glance, but close enough that you could tell it was a warning. Well, what was so disturbing about the sight was that the torso of the coyote had nothing attached besides its head, and its eyes had been popped out. There were long cuts stretching across its back, yet everything looked to still be inside. But what was so confusing was that there were no signs of where the legs were or where they had been taken, just gone. I often wonder as to what that was all about. I mean, had it been an animal, why wasn't it eaten and instead left like a sick, twisted trophy, a warning? And what concerns me the most is that had I have left my window open like I always did, perhaps I wouldn't be here to tell you about this experience in the first place.
Spooky story time. Paramedic stories, police officer stories, they are always so intriguing because I'm sure 100% positive that they see spooky, crazy things every single day. I came across this spooky story online. I will write all of the information in the description, but this is what it says. It says, I work as a paramedic, and up until recently, I didn't believe in ghosts or spirits. I got a call around 10 p.m. at night, concerned for welfare, happens all the time, usually in warden-controlled properties, as they have falls all the time. My colleague wanted to FaceTime her kids before bed, so I said I'd go into the property by myself and I'd call her if I needed any backup. I knocked on the door, met by an old man who asked why I was there. I proceeded to tell him that we got a call, and he said that he had pressed his care call alarm by mistake. I asked if he wanted checking over, to which he responded he had issues with his blood pressure, so may as well while I was there. Directly from the front door was the bedroom. The light was on and there was a woman sat up in the bed. She looked at me but didn't say anything. I assumed she had dementia, so I just left her to it. We walked into the lounge and I did my assessment. After my assessment, we got into small talk, weather, what he used to do for a living. I then asked him about his wife, how long they had been together. He responded that they had been together for a little over 40 years before she sadly passed 4 years ago. I then apologized and said at least it was nice he had another woman to share his bed with. He then responded back, "What woman? I live here alone." I was like, "So who was the woman in his bed?" And he said, "Fuck if I know, mate." I asked if he could show me a picture of his missus, and I shit you not, there she was, the woman a bit younger in the picture with him. I walked out of the room, looked into the bedroom, again, she wasn't there. I couldn't wait to get out of that house. I then proceeded to be dead silent for the rest of my shift, so much that my colleague went to management as she thought it was totally out of character and that I was suffering with PTSD. When I told her and them the story, they didn't believe me. Again, I am pretty sure that police officers, anyone within that work field, I'm sure that they see scary things
every single day. What do you guys think that this paramedic saw? Could it have been his imagination? Maybe he was tired from a long shift? Or do you think that it was this man's wife who had already passed? Let me know what you guys think. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jasmine and this is Into the Further. I share all things spooky, scary, paranormal, and true crime. And if you guys have any spooky stories that you'd like for me to read, please send them via DM or email because I'd love to read them, and I will see you guys in the next spooky story. Bye!
Would you ask a dead woman to be your girlfriend for a dare? Guys, I sound like shit because my husband got me sick, so everybody in the comments tell my husband, boo! He got me sick as fuck in this coffee shop right now. I'm about to get everybody sick in here. On the off chance somebody believes I'm really out there getting people sick in a coffee shop, this is green screen. If you do want to listen to the story in Spanish, it's coming from Extra Normal podcast, and it is called Amor Mortal. And if you don't know Spanish, let me go ahead and translate the story for you. So the guy that wrote in the story says that he has a friend named Manuel who was the typical skeptic and he never believed in anything paranormal. He remembers how Manuel would always say, I'm never gonna go through anything paranormal. It doesn't matter what I try, it doesn't matter what I do, because that shit does not exist. So the guy who wrote in the story says that there was one night where again this paranormal topic came up and his friend was like, I'm never gonna believe in it, nothing ever happens to me. And he was like, well, what if I dare you to do a ritual? And that Manuel was like, well, I'll do it because obviously nothing is gonna come of it. Manuel went as far as to tell him that he'll do whatever he wants, nothing's gonna happen, because apparently these paranormal things only existed in weak-minded people. So Manuel at this point was so cocky and he's like, I'll do anything you ask me to do, it's not gonna work, whatever you want me to do, I'll go ahead and do it. So in the town that they lived in, there was an abandoned hacienda, and inside the hacienda was like the really big house, and it also had their own cemetery. It was a tiny little cemetery. Obviously it was just for the family members who used to live there. This hacienda was really old, so the cemetery, like everybody who had been buried there, was from a very long time ago. There was nothing recent or even like 10 years before that. This hacienda was really locked up and secure, but of course people would go in there because they wanted to explore and they would just jump the fence anytime. So the friend tells Manuel that he has to go to the store and buy a rose, and that they were gonna go to the abandoned hacienda. He was gonna go to that little cemetery and he was gonna look for a name that maybe called out to him. Whoever it was, just make sure it was a woman. After that, I'll tell you what you need to do. So the day came, Manuel got a rose, they jump the fence, they go to that little cemetery, and he's looking through each of those tombs. So he chose a tomb and it belonged to a woman named Catalina Gomez. So Manuel turns to his friend and says, okay, I choose this one, what do you want me to do? His friend tells him that he has to place the rose on the tomb and that he had to declare his love to the woman Catalina Gomez. His friend tells him that he has to ask the woman to be his girlfriend and that he has to tell her that he is completely in love with her. Manuel starts laughing and he's like, oh my god, you are ridiculous, but he's like, okay, I'll do it. He places the rose on the tomb. He's like, Catalina Gomez, I am so in love with you, will you please be my girlfriend? And then he starts adding shit. Like, I am so in love with you, I cannot live without you. Like, he was being so dramatic and theatrical because he knew it wasn't gonna work, and he knew that his friend was making him do something so stupid. He was really amused. He was like laughing because he's like, the things that people will go through, the people that believe in the paranormal will go through, obviously nothing is gonna happen to me. And nothing did happen to him that time. They ended up leaving the hacienda altogether. So again, they left the hacienda, they went to Manuel's house, and nothing happened. And honestly, the guy telling us the story says that he was bummed out because he really wanted something to happen, but he's like, damn, he's right, nothing's gonna happen to him. He just let it go. He's like, fine, whatever, I guess. However, there's this thing that his friend says that he did see. He said that when they left the hacienda to go to Manuel's house, he noticed that Manuel was looking around himself. Like, he was looking to see if anybody was there. So he thought that maybe Manuel was a little bit scared, but he was not going to admit to it. So the following day, he actually gets a phone call from Manuel, and Manuel says that after his friend left his house and he was going to sleep, he was awoken by the voice of a woman saying only one word, which was mío. And in English, that means mine. Immediately, Manuel turns on the lamp in his bedroom. He looks around, he sees nothing in there, and he decides that maybe he is making this shit up. Like, maybe his mind is playing tricks on him and it's not real. So thinking it was just a trick of his mind, he's hallucinating, whatever is happening, he ends up turning the lights off. He decides he's gonna go back to sleep. And again, he hears a woman's voice say, mine. In that moment, he decides that he's just gonna pray, and he admits that he prayed so much that eventually he didn't realize when he fell asleep again. And again, when he wakes up the next morning, he calls his friend. He's telling him everything that happened the night about the girl's voice. And his friend, he just says, well, I think it did work then. That ritual of you putting the flower on the tomb, maybe it did work. His friend was like, well, when you took the rose, you literally told her like you were gonna be with her forever. Maybe that did happen. Maybe she believes that you're gonna be with her forever. Now, his friend admits that he only said that because he wanted to scare Manuel even more. Ever since that ritual that they did, weird things started to happen to Manuel. He was starting to see shadows. He would see objects move or like cups fall on the ground and break. But Manuel tried to be realistic and he's like, well, it was the wind. It was this. He didn't want to admit to himself that he was going through something paranormal. This is how Manuel lived for a good minute because he refused to believe that he was experiencing anything paranormal. That was until there was one day where Manuel went up to his friend and he admits that he's had enough. He doesn't want to deal with this anymore. It got to the point where now he was seeing a silhouette of a woman in his room when he was going to bed. Manuel tells his friend that there's nights where, I'm guessing it's sleep paralysis or cuando se sube el muerto, because he's saying that he's laying there, he cannot move, and he can clearly see a lady just walking slowly towards him, and she starts touching his chest. She starts touching his feet. He is not looking at like this hot ass bitch touching his chest and feet. He explains that he is terrified of her. She looks really old, but that there's just something wrong with her face. He tells his friend that he regrets going to the cemetery and doing this ritual because now he does believe that the paranormal exists, and he doesn't want to deal with this anymore. Manuel tells his friend, look, I can't deal with this anymore. You need to tell me what I have to do so that this lady can leave me alone. His friend still being like, I told you the paranormal existed. I told you this, I told you that. Anyways, his friend's like, okay, fine. Let's go back to the cemetery and ask her for forgiveness and ask her to stop bothering you. Tell her that you're sorry and you didn't mean it. Manuel ends up getting a dozen of roses. They climb the fence. They go to the hacienda. They go to the little cemetery. He places the roses on Catalina's tomb and he says, Catalina, I am so sorry. Please forgive me. I'm sorry for coming here disrespecting you, but I would like for you to leave me alone. Again, I am so sorry for even bothering you. He tells Catalina, please rest in peace, but please leave me alone. And it was in that moment where his friend is looking at him like begging a lady to leave him alone, where he's like, oh shit, like this is serious. My friend Manuel is really scared. But I think it was because Manuel didn't explain to him everything that was happening. He knew some stuff here and there, and obviously he knew that Manuel wanted her to leave him alone, so something was happening, but I don't think the friend knew to the extent of what was happening. Honestly, he did think to himself that maybe Manuel was holding back a lot of the things that was happening because he was embarrassed. Again, he was a skeptic, and now he had to admit to his friend that things were happening. So he thought that maybe that's why Manuel hadn't told them everything, because he looked terrified in that moment. So they left the hacienda, they left the cemetery, and honestly, it was just like a waiting game. But Manuel didn't experience anything anymore. There was no shadows, nothing was making him have sleep paralysis, and night after night, he was sleeping well without a woman's voice coming and saying mine, so they thought that everything was okay. They really did think that it worked, that taking her the roses, saying I'm sorry, because again, he was left alone. He was able to sleep in peace finally. So the friend who is telling us the story says that there was a night, I guess Manuel called him around 3 or 4 in the morning, but honestly, he was asleep. He didn't even hear his phone. So when he woke up is when he saw that missed call from Manuel. He notices that Manuel left him a voicemail, so he decided to play the voicemail, and he says that on the voicemail, he can hear Manuel just screaming, and he sounded very like desperate. Then he starts screaming, she's coming for me, help me, help me. The voicemail ends, and his friend was living with roommates, and he's like, can you please take me to Manuel's house? I think something happened. He didn't have a car, so they were like, yeah, let's take you. He goes over to Manuel's house. When they get to Manuel's apartment, Manuel lives alone, and they open up the door. It was too late. He had passed away, and he was laying on the ground, and next to him there was a note. When his friend picks up the note, he reads it, and it says, she's gonna take me, I belong to her. Unfortunately, Manuel passed away, and when they did the autopsy, it was found out that he died of a heart attack. His friend, the one telling the story, says that he ends up telling like family members and friends the stupid shit that they did with the ritual, and they all believe that they played with something that was not good. They believe that maybe that entity or the being, because of course they thought it was an old lady, but the way she would appear to him with the sleep paralysis, maybe they thought it was something else, and that this thing definitely took Manuel. But what do you guys think?
My dead dad's voicemail greeting changed 3 weeks after his funeral. This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about what he warned me not to let my mom do. I know how that sounds. I know phones glitch. I know grief makes people hear things, and I know there are a dozen logical explanations people will give before they even let me finish the story. But I know what I heard. My dad died suddenly in March, and he had a heart attack at home while my mom was out running errands. By the time she came back, he was already gone. For the first few weeks after the funeral, I kept calling his phone. I didn't expect anyone to answer. I just wanted to hear his voicemail. It was stupid and sad, but it helped. His greeting was the same one he'd had for years. "Hey, it's me. Leave a message." That was it. No name or a joke or even a long recording, just his voice. I would call, let it play, and then I'd hang up before the beep. I did that almost every night, and then 3 weeks in, after his funeral, the greeting changed. I was sitting in bed when I called. I remember because I had just turned off my lamp and I was about to go to sleep. The phone rang 4 times, and then my dad answered. It wasn't live, it was still the voicemail greeting, but it wasn't the usual one. His voice said, "Hey, sweetheart, if this is you, don't let your mother sell the house." I sat straight up. The message kept going. He sounded tired. It wasn't emotional, not ghostly, not distorted, just like my dad sounded near the end of a long day. And he said, "She can leave, but don't let her sell it, and don't let her go into the back bedroom alone." And then the beep sounded. I didn't move. I just sat there holding the phone against my ear. My dad had never had a greeting like that. He also never called me sweetheart in voicemail messages. He called me that in person, but never on the phone. I called again, and this time the normal greeting played. "Hey, it's me. Leave a message." I called a third time, and it was the normal greeting again. I tried recording the screen, but every time after that, it was back to the original message. I called my mom immediately. It was late, so she answered half asleep in panic because she thought something had happened. I asked if she had changed Dad's voicemail, and she said no. I asked if she had been talking about selling the house, and there was a long pause. And then she said, "Who told you that?" Nobody had told me. She had not mentioned it to me once. She said she had an appointment with a realtor the next morning, and she had only scheduled it that afternoon. I asked about the back bedroom, and that was the room at the end of the hall. It used to be my parents' office, but after my dad retired, it had become more of a storage room. Old files and Christmas decorations and boxes of things they didn't want to sort through. My mom said there was nothing special about it, but she sounded strange when she said it. The next morning, I went to the house before the realtor arrived. My mom was already there, standing in the kitchen with all the lights on. She said she hadn't slept, and I asked her again about the back bedroom. She said after my dad died, she started hearing noises from that room at night. It wasn't anything dramatic, just small things, a drawer opening or a box shifting, the floor creaking like someone was walking in a circle. And she said she didn't tell me because she didn't want me to think she was losing it. The door to that room was closed when I got there, and my mom said she hadn't closed it. We both stood in the hallway looking at it for a while, and then I called my dad's phone again. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted the normal voicemail to play so I could prove to myself that I had imagined everything. It rang 4 times, and then his voice answered, and this time he said my full name. Not my nickname or sweetheart, but my entire full name. And then he said, "Don't open that door with her standing behind you." I turned around so fast I dropped the phone, and my mom was standing behind me in the hallway, crying. The voicemail kept playing from the floor, and my dad's voice said, "It knows she's alone now." And then the message ended. We left the house without opening the back bedroom. My mom canceled the realtor appointment from the car, and later that day, my brother went over with 2 of his friends and checked the room. There was nothing inside except boxes. No animal or a person, or maybe even an open window, nothing. Nothing that explained the noises, and nothing that explained the voicemail. My brother thinks I misheard the greeting because I was grieving. My mom won't talk about it. She moved into an apartment a month later, but she never sold the house. She just locked it up and left it empty. I don't call my dad's number anymore, and the last time I tried, it had been disconnected. But I know what I heard in that hallway, and I know my dad warned me before we opened that door. Anyway, Good luck sleeping tonight.
I got a really good cryptid story for you, and this one is from one of my followers. Her name is Christina, and she is from Northwest Ohio. Christina grew up in the country surrounded by woods and cornfields, and in the summer, she and her friends would ride bikes down a long, windy road to a campground to go swimming at the pool. So one evening, when they were on their way back home, they were riding down that long, windy road, and they heard something rustling in the corn. So at first, they're kind of listening and just assuming it's a deer, chalking it up to being a deer. But then the sound kept getting louder, more apparent. The kind of sound that makes you stop dead in your tracks. They all kind of said out loud at the same time that it sounded really big, like something big was running through the corn. And the really creepy thing was that when they stopped their bikes to get a better listen, the thing stopped too. Another thing that they were having trouble with was pinpointing exactly where the sound was coming from, because there were cornfields on both sides of the road, and it kind of echoed across, so it was really difficult to tell where it was coming from. She also mentions that this was about late August, so the corn was way taller than any of them, and whatever was in there was completely hidden for now. So they stood there for a little bit, whispering to each other, trying to make sense of what they heard. And then one of them jokingly said, "I told you guys it was just a deer. We must have spooked him." So they all agreed, laughed it off, and kept on pedaling. But deep down, every single one of them knew that was not a deer. So they finally made their way down that long curvy road to the point where they got down underneath a streetlight, and they were not too far from Christina's house at this point. And then once they were sort of in the safety of the streetlight, they all kind of let it out, talking over each other, acting like, "Oh my gosh, we were so scared. We know that was not a deer," right? And then they heard it. It was a loud, deep howl, long and sustained. So they all get quiet. And now they're scanning down over the fields. And so from their perspective, since they were far enough away from the corn, they could now see down over the tops of the stalks. And guys, something was standing in the middle of the cornfield. Christina describes it as blacker than the night sky around it. She said it was tall and human-like with enormous glowing eyes. It was standing way taller than the corn, and the corn was already towering over them. She says to this day that the closest thing that she can attribute it to might be like a Bigfoot type creature, because it did not look like any animal that she had ever known to exist. And it moved like something that knew exactly what it was doing, just that higher kind of intelligence. So they all hop on their bikes and they are pedaling as fast as they can all the way to Christina's house. And when they hit the front yard, they jumped off their bikes and they turned back one more time just to scan the fields again. Christina said all she could hear was their own breathing, shaking so hard. And then the corn started to move fast, bending in half and breaking as whatever this thing was started charging in their direction through the corn. She said they were across the street and a decent distance away, and they could hear this thing crashing through the stalks. And then it stood up again, glowing eyes beaming at them in the dark. So they all ran in the house and they told Christina's parents. And of course, you know, as the parents always do, they chalked it up to, oh, it was probably just a deer and the howling was probably a coyote or something. And every one of them agreed, no way, nope, was not a coyote. She also said that they never again went down that road at night. And that wasn't the end of it, you guys. So a couple years later, a neighboring farmer started having moments where he would have to fire his GUN at something that was tormenting his horses. It was described as something big and human-like, and they even called the police. Christina's dad even took her out to watch the officers walk the property as they tried to look for whatever this thing was. And they never really found anything other than the horses being completely spooked and freaked out. For a long time after that, she would always see that farmer walking and pacing the edges of his property with his GUN, you know, to try to protect his horses from whatever this was. And get this, Christina's dad kept on blaming it on coyotes. For years, he would chalk it up to coyotes until way later when Christina was no longer a child. Once she was grown and moved away, her dad finally admitted he had seen something too. Something he couldn't explain, but he didn't want to scare the kids. And his description was exactly the same: tall, human-like, huge eyes. And I guess it's still a mystery. So what are your thoughts? I know that Christina will be in the comments checking them out. And if you have a cryptid story of your own, you got to share it. If you're interested in Creepy Storytime merch, check out the link in my bio. And if you're new here, follow for more Creepy Storytime.
The person that sent the story just called it my story. By the way, if you have a story that you'd like to share with our glitch community about glitches in the Matrix, dreams, aliens, cryptids, or the paranormal, you can send it to this email address. And remember, we believe you. Hi, I have a story to tell. Nobody ever believes me. We do. We believe you. We believe you. My name is Elizabeth, and you are welcome to use my name. Hello, Elizabeth. I've always been fascinated with spirits, afterlife, astral projection, etc. I was a heroin addict for many years. I got sent to prison, and they put me in a prison-run rehab. While I was there, I was constantly watching videos about people contacting the other side. My sister died right before I was arrested, and I was grieving. I tried a spirit box app, but nothing happened. I found spirit writing, and I tried it, and the pen started moving on its own. The writing was shaky at first, but it got easier to do over time. I spoke with the spirit for a long time over paper. He would draw me pictures that looked like anime, and I can't draw. It was a young man, and he was very sweet and began to be very romantic towards me. I told him I had a boyfriend, and he said he didn't like my boyfriend and wanted me to leave him. One day I started hearing him talk in my mind. When you channel a spirit, it makes you move your mouth as they speak. I freaked out because it's a little bit much to suddenly have someone in your mind. He got very upset, and his other friends were there, and he said that he had been being sweet, but his friends were angry at me for playing with his feelings. They harassed me relentlessly for months, picking me apart for every thought and memory, messing with me. I was a wreck, and I thought I was possessed by a demon. I found a spiritualist church, and the guy who ran it was a channel for a spirit that he called Angel. I begged him to help me, and he said no, but while I was there, his angel came to me and asked me what was going on. I told her everything, and she told me that she would talk to the spirits, and she said that it was a group of kids who were just messing with me. After that, they stopped, and I developed a friendship with the one who had been talking to me. We spent a few years together. A few years. But when I got out of the program, he didn't want to move back home with me, even though he had followed me there. He said that he found a group of friends who he wanted to stay with. Anyway, he said goodbye, and it's been over a year since I moved here. He was a huge source of support and helped me through the hardest part of my life. Am I understanding this correctly? That this is a spirit that was like a really good friend to you? It's a spirit, right? I'm now out of prison. I have stayed sober and will always remember my ghost friend. Okay, yes, it was a ghost friend. Just remember that there are many people in the world we can't see, so someone is always watching. They can hear our stream of consciousness. I know I'm not crazy or schizophrenic. They were real people. So much happened that I couldn't possibly tell you everything. You can feel their touch. He used to caress my feet while I was in bed going to sleep, bang on the walls. At one point, I was in the middle of a circle of spirits who were all amazed that I could feel them, and they would put their hands on me and push me forward. During the bad times, they would choke me and pinch me. Nope. When a group of spirits put their hands on you, it sends a vibration through your body. The way that they speak to you in your mind is also strange because it sounds like it's loud, and when the spirits were upset at me, they would make heavy metal music out loud in the weird channeling space, and I was able to use my mind to make music and noises and speak with them in it. It's hard to describe. It can be overstimulating. They love to sing and make music. It was such a trip. I'm trying to get out all the stuff, but it's hard to remember everything. Okay, and I started doing meditation, the gateway tapes, to get out of my body to go be with them. It worked, and eventually I was able to leave my body a few times and see them and talk to them and run around with them, but I was easily popped back into my body. Anyway, there is some of my story. Oh my God, the end. Oh my God, you were able to literally practice and astral project to go hang out with the spirits that you were hanging out with before. First of all, I do not like that they were mean to you. Please remember, you and anyone else watching this, if there is anything happening, use your fucking words and set boundaries. You need to set boundaries with these things. I'm very on the fence here because they were not being nice to you at one point, but they were being really nice to you. And you said that it was they really helped you out during this really hard time in your life. So I'm very on the fence as to was this a good spirit? Was this a bad spirit? Was this just a neutral spirit that was just whatever? Did you give them permission to touch you, by the way? This was so interesting. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and thank you so much for sharing.
Want to get creeped out? Have you ever heard of the shoebox telephone game? I have a story of someone who tried it because they were attempting to contact their deceased grandfather. And after doing this, she begins to receive signs from her grandfather that lead her to uncover uncovering a dark family secret. This allegedly really happened, and it's wild.
This one is so crazy. This one's literally insane. This story came from a girl named Gabriella, and she lives in New Orleans. Gabriella wanted to try and get in touch with her grandfather, who is deceased. She was best friends with her grandfather, which is really cute. Same. He was always joking around with her, and he also filled the role of a father figure for her because her father had passed away when she was 7. So he really stepped in her life. She was devastated when he passed and was seriously struggling with depression when she tried this ritual. She wrote him a letter telling him how much she missed him and how she could barely find a reason to live anymore because that's how depressed she felt. Her personal object was a deck of cards he had bought for her, and it had like different pictures of sea life on the back. Her and her grandfather, their thing had been like they would always play cards. She reads the letter, goes to bed that night. That night, she dreams of her grandfather and that they were playing cards together. Super sweet dream. In the dream, they're like talking, laughing, and at one point, he laughs so loud that she wakes up with like a start, and it felt like the laugh had actually been in the room. So she ran to her phone booth, aka her closet, immediately and held the receiver to her ear. She sat there for a long time, but heard nothing. Eventually, she gave up and went to bed. But what began to happen next was very, very odd, and it's so cool. So the next morning, she went to grab a box of cereal from the cupboard downstairs, the same cereal she ate every single morning. And in front of the cereal box was a card, a 6 of hearts. She takes it as a sign from her grandfather that he's there for her and loves her. A week later, she's walking with her friend Tiffany in the French Quarter.
Did you know that over 1,000 people a year disappear from Yellowstone National Park? And most of them are never found. Now, this story comes out of Yellowstone. There was this man named Jeff. Jeff said every year him and his father would go camping at Yellowstone National Park. And this one particular summer, they decided to go for the weekend. Now, they had found a new spot that was pretty remote, and this was their first time camping in this area. So they set up their campsite, they get a good fire going, and they started to tell scary stories. After a while, Jeff started getting tired, and he tells his dad, like, I'm going to go in the tent and lay down. So he goes into the tent, and he falls asleep. Well, a couple hours later, he wakes up to his father, who is screaming and having, like, some kind of nightmare. And he's like, Dad, are you okay? And his dad is just, help me. And he said, he just was like, okay, he must be having a bad nightmare. So he managed to just ignore him and eventually fall back asleep. But shortly after that, he wakes up again. And he has like this really bad feeling, like something is wrong. And he just couldn't seem to shake it. So he unzips the tent, he goes outside and starts using the restroom. When all of a sudden he hears his father's voice clearly say, Jeff, come over here. Come into the woods. And he's like, Dad, like, what are you doing out of the tent? And he's like, Jeff, come on, come into the woods, Jeff. Jeff, come here. And he's like, okay. So he starts walking into the woods. And he's like, Dad, where are you? Where are you? And he just hears his dad say, come a little closer, Jeff. Come a little closer. And that's when he noticed it just got really, really quiet. And all of a sudden, he hears a clapping sound. Then he hears it again. Then he hears it a third time. And out of the corner of his eye, he sees the shadow of something kind of zigzagging between the trees. And then, right in front of him, he sees this deer. Except this deer is standing on its hind legs like a person. It has antlers, it has all the features of a deer. But it has these glowing yellow eyes. And it is talking in his father's voice. So Jeff frantically runs back to the tent. And when he unzips it, he is shocked to find his father is not in there. So he starts yelling for his father, looking all around. And that's when he sees truck lights. And he sees his father's truck. And he realizes his father was not in the tent. He must have left and went somewhere. So he runs up to his father and is like freaked out, tells him what happened. And his father was like, after you fell asleep, I went over to this other people's campsite and I was hanging out with them for a while. And then I was coming back to go to bed. But he can see that Jeff is visibly shaken. So he says, you know what, let's just go ahead and leave. Well, as they were making their way out of the Yellowstone Park, he said they happened to overhear some people at the visitor center talking about someone had went missing. And what was eerie is he was very similar in age and look to Jeff. Now, this next story also comes out of Yellowstone. There was this geologist, and he was tasked with going to this particular region of Yellowstone in the southeast corner that is pretty remote and rarely visited, and there has not been a lot of people doing research in this area. So he happens to go there for like 3 days to do some kind of research. So he had set up his campsite and he was making dinner when all of a sudden he started to hear like a humming sound. And he said it was just kind of buzzing in his head, and it was just like very repetitive. And he couldn't figure out like where would that be coming from, because there's nothing out here, it's just woods everywhere. So he started walking in the direction of this humming sound, and he could hear it getting louder and louder. And that's when he runs right into this like 8-foot tall fence, and it goes down all the way on both sides. And he's like, why is there this huge fence out in the middle of the forest? Like, what is behind here? So he manages to find a spot where he could get in underneath the fence, and he crawls into this area. He starts walking around for a little bit, and he could hear the humming sound getting louder and louder. And that's when he came out to sort of this clearing, and he said he couldn't believe his eyes. There was this pyramid-like rock structure with some kind of entrance, and there were these very tall men coming out of it. And he said, they were just tall, gray, very long arms, very long heads, is the way he described it. And he said they noticed him, and he started to panic. But then all of a sudden he heard a voice in his head say, "Do not be afraid." And he just instantly felt peace overcome him. And he said, then it said, "You are not ready to know what we know. You need to leave." And so he turned and he left, and he went back under the fence and he got out of there. So he leaves his campsite and he goes to the nearest ranger station, and he starts telling them there's something out there, I don't know what's happening, but there's this fenced in area. And all the rangers are kind of yeah, this guy's losing it. So as he leaves the ranger station, one of the rangers runs up to him and is like, "Hey, don't tell anyone, but I believe you. There is a lot of weird stuff that goes on here that we don't really talk about, but you did see something, and something happened."
This photo was taken at the Congress Hotel in Chicago, specifically inside of the famously haunted Florentine Room. A shadow figure was photographed towards the back wall, even though there were no other people in the room. My mom's house is haunted, so my brother took a few pictures of her standing at the end of her hallway. It wasn't until after he adjusted the brightness when we noticed this very scary, very dark figure standing next to her. We don't have any pets in our home. A friend's aunt was looking at some properties for possible purchase and was taking pictures to review later. She took a picture of this hallway in one of the properties that she was interested in. If you zoom in, you can see what appears to be a child, possibly a girl, sitting or standing on the stairs. I was home alone one night and I captured something that I believe is paranormal. My house has always had strange occurrences, and I've always felt scared being there alone. On this particular night, I kept hearing noises coming from this hallway. I took a bunch of photos in that direction and all over my house. And out of the hundreds of photos that I took, only one of them captured this strange and creepy entity.
Let's read a true, scary story. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage, where creepy and cozy meet. So grab a plushie and get cozy, because it's creepy cozy time at the Creepy Cozy Cottage. I was in my second year of middle school and all was going well. I was a little more than halfway through my school year. Grades were doing fantastic. I actually was an honor roll student and woke up as usual to start my day at 4 a.m. I remember having a pleasant dream of me flying through my town like I was Superman that previous night. I went down to the kitchen, and I remember that morning had been particularly gray, and there was moisture in the air because the windows were fogged up. You could barely see out of them. I began pouring myself a bowl of cereal at the island in the kitchen. which was more towards the back of the house. There was a window which looked directly into the kitchen from the backyard. The only caveat was that this window was 7 feet off the ground. So from the ground up to the bottom of the window, unless you were a basketball player from the NBA, you sure as hell wouldn't be able to see into the window, let alone peer inside. The backyard was also fenced off. As I'm pouring my cereal, I hear 3 distinct, deliberate, spaced out knocks. It didn't even register to me what was happening until the first 2 knocks. And it wasn't until the third and final knock on the window that I looked up, and there it was. A pale, dark gray figure standing there menacingly and motionless, just watching me. It was featureless as far as I could tell, but it was definitely humanoid in terms of bodily proportions. It didn't appear to be wearing anything. It was as if it was naked from at least the torso up. Remember how I said that the height from the ground to the bottom of the window was 7 feet tall? Whatever it was had been comfortably standing high enough past that threshold where I could make out its head, shoulders, and upper middle torso. I sat there, milk endlessly pouring into the now overflooded cereal bowl. I had the most terrifying staring contest with something I can only describe as a true wake-up call. About 10 minutes of just being stuck, I suddenly snapped out of my frozen stupor and set the milk down and slowly began to back away. And the moment I hit the entrance of the hallway, I turned around and ran up the stairs. I woke my parents up and told them what happened, to which my dad replied, "Okay, give me a second," and then took his sweet time getting out of bed, and by the time we got downstairs and made it to the kitchen, the thing was gone. The walk to school later that morning was surreal, to say the least. The real issue came after that experience that day. I was still pretty stirred up by the whole situation, but halfway through the school day, I forgot about it and proceeded as usual. Later that night, I found it very hard to get sleep, which is not unusual for me at all. I always kept my windows open at night because I was in the attic, so most of the summer heat went right up there. I'm lying in bed watching cartoons. It was about midnight by now when I hear unusual movement outside my window, and I chop it up to nothing. About 20 minutes go by, and suddenly, whatever it was stops moving, and following that, all the usual ambient noise goes completely dead. I again think nothing of it, and finally find myself able to begin drifting off to sleep. That same night, I had the most terrifying sleep paralysis episode of my life. This wasn't the Hat Man. This wasn't some random dark figure. Whatever it was demonic. I was stuck in this sleep paralysis for 5 minutes straight. The atmosphere of my room was dark and gloomy. All I could do was stare at this dark, shadowy figure staring at me just above my window. Its eyes were a fiery reddish orange, which pierced into my soul. It had very twisted horns, and its hands were instead claws. It was like it was straight out of a horror movie. It didn't do anything besides sit there and stare at me. And when I finally woke up fully, it was gone, and it was daytime. I proceeded to experience the same terrifying sleep paralysis episode, struggled to sleep at night and movement at night for 6 months straight. There wasn't a single night where it didn't happen. The icing on the cake was that every 3rd week, this thing would be in a new and terrifying spot. I remember one night, clear as day, that I had been stuck in my sleep paralysis for almost 10 minutes. I had rolled over in my sleep and was facing the wall. I was stuck there with this thing breathing down my neck. When I woke up, I literally began to break down and cry. It was just so overwhelming, and it had been happening every night. There was another night when I fell asleep on my back, and the thing was directly above me, gripped into the ceiling, staring down at me. Then, seemingly for no reason at all, after those 6 months, the first day of the 7th month, it all stopped. By that point, a lot of damage had been done already. I wasn't doing too well in my classes. I was falling asleep in school. I had no energy for anything. I was borderline terrified of sleeping at night. I had been in and out of therapy. My parents really couldn't do anything besides support me. I went on to fortunately but barely graduate that year and moved into my final year of middle school with higher hopes. Everything went well, and I managed to make a solid comeback. Skip ahead to the end of my 8th grade year. We just got out of summer break. It was July. I had recently turned 15, and my family had ended up moving back to an old apartment since the rent was a bit lower, and I was preparing for high school later that year. Halfway through July, the same exact sleep paralysis episodes came back, except this time there was 2 of these things now. I'll never get this image out of my head, but on the first night that I got sleep paralysis again, right at the foot of my bed, was the demonic figures just peering over the edge of my bed, staring at me again. Those episodes lasted for 3 months, and then I never had sleep paralysis again after that. Thanks to whatever it was that had tortured me, I now struggle with really bad insomnia. Like some nights, I can't even go to bed until morning, which at times isn't until 7 a.m. As an adult now, I've had to learn remote jobs just so I can keep sane. Not even that I'm scared to sleep anymore. If I could get some decent sleep at night, I would take it any day. But I just don't get tired, and even when I am tired, I can't find myself in a position to just drift off anymore. I just wish I could sleep. Let me know what you thought, and if you have any scary stories of your own you'd like me to share, just send me a DM.
I stopped at a rest area around 2 a.m. and everybody there was acting like they were waiting for something. So a couple years ago, I was driving home after visiting some family, and I had been driving for hours. It was around 2 a.m. And when I got to the rest area, there were other cars there. I wasn't alone, and I just thought that I would get out and I would stretch my legs. So as I got out of my car, I kind of just looked around, and I noticed that everybody was still sitting inside of their cars. Nobody was using any picnic tables, nobody was going to the restroom. They were just sitting in their cars awake, just kind of staring. Anyways, I continued to do what I was going to do. I walked to the restroom, washed my hands, and I grabbed some food from the vending machine. When I came out, I noticed that there was still 15 cars. Nobody left, nobody came. As I got back into my car, I noticed an older man parked next to me. And as I was looking at him, I noticed that he was staring straight ahead, like his eyes looked a little glazed. So I followed what he was looking at, and across the parking lot, like kind of by the trees, like it led into like a little wood area, was a person just standing there. They weren't moving at all, they were just standing there, and at first I wondered if they were just waiting for a ride, except I noticed that they weren't like looking into the parking lot, they were looking into the trees on the backside. I kind of looked around to see if anybody else had noticed besides me and the older man. Nobody was reacting to anything. I started my car and my headlights turned on, and they went towards the woods where the person was standing, right? And once they got to that point, there wasn't a person standing there anymore. So I just figured that I was imagining it. The older man next to me, he rolled down his window, so I rolled mine down. And he didn't look at me when he was talking. He was still looking straight forward, but he said, "Most people don't go outside of their car after 2 when you stop at this rest station." And then he rolled his window back up before I could even say anything. After that, I got out on the freeway or highway because I was creeped out, and I drove about 20 miles down the road, and then I stopped at a gas station. As I went in to go give cash for my gas pump, the cashier just casually asked me, like, "Hey, like, where are you coming from?" I let him know the name of the rest stop that I was coming from, and they just kind of stared at me and they said, "You went there after 2? Like, you stopped there after 2 a.m.? I just kind of like shook my head like, yes, and they said locals don't, and I said, "Oh, like, what do I not know? Like, why don't the locals?" And he said that if you see somebody standing in that parking lot, don't take your eyes off of them until you back out onto the highway. And I asked him what happens if you do, and he told me, "You won't know that you left with company." I still drive that highway every single year to go visit my family, but I don't stop at that rest station anymore.
While I don't know about the validity of this video, I do know that this can actually happen. It's something called spontaneous human combustion, and it's been a mystery for hundreds of years, with the first known case being recorded in the 1400s and the most recent case happening just under a decade ago. However, there's quite a controversy about whether it actually exists or not, because all of the victims of spontaneous human combustion are usually found alone with no witnesses around, except for one case. There was a woman who struggled with mental illness, whose father was her caretaker. Well, one day, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a bright flash, and when he turned around, his daughter was engulfed in flames. Despite being on fire, she sat completely quiet and still in her chair, giving no indication that she was in any pain at all. Her father attempted to put the fire out, but it severely burnt his hands. And the daughter would actually survive this, but would unfortunately pass away after being in a coma. But this case gave us lots of new information about spontaneous human combustion. If you think about it, it takes a really hot flame to burn the human body. That's why crematoriums have special furnaces to burn human remains. But what's strange is that with every case of spontaneous human combustion that we know of, there are no burns in the room around the victim's body, which indicates that the person simply stayed in one place while being on fire. We currently have no explanation as to why this happens, or even if it happens in the way that we think it does. But what we do know is that alcohol consumption is thought to be related to cases of spontaneous human combustion, and since alcohol use can sometimes render people unconscious, this may explain why victims are eerily still while literally being consumed by fire from the inside out.
What would you do if you woke up in the middle of the night to go check on your baby and you see La Llorona standing right next to him, caressing his face? I recently came across a story in Spanish. I'm going to translate it in English and tag the original creator right down here. I'm also going to tell the story in the first person like it happened to me, but it did not happen to me. I probably wouldn't be here if that had happened to me. So my husband had recently gotten a new job that required us to move to the middle of nowhere. We recently had just had a baby as well. His job required him to be on call practically 24/7, leaving me home alone with the baby on most nights. At first, everything was completely normal until one night where I happened to be home alone. I'm getting ready to put the baby to sleep when out of nowhere, I get this like god-awful feeling like at the pit of my stomach. I almost felt like I wasn't home alone, like there was something else in the house with me, and it was almost like my baby could also feel it because my baby became very like restless. I decided to go around the house and check every room and didn't see anything, and finally decided to just shrug it off and just try to convince myself that I was probably just a little afraid for the fact that I was home alone in this new house in the middle of nowhere. Fast forward the next day, home alone once again. It's a beautiful day. It's about 3 in the afternoon. I decided to open up all the windows to let some fresh air in when I happen to look out of the window and I see her. There's a woman standing right across from my house, just staring directly into my house. She had long black hair and was wearing this long white gown. At first I thought that maybe it was just like one of the neighbors that had like wandered like to our property, but what really caught me off guard is the fact that this woman just stood there. She almost looked like a mannequin, like no expression. She just stood there staring at my house for what felt like forever. The longer I looked at her, the more unsettled I felt, that I ended up getting up and shutting all my windows and just going in my house for the rest of the day. Fast forward to that night, I'm home alone once again. I'm getting ready to put my baby to sleep when out of nowhere, I feel that same gut-wrenching feeling that I have felt a few nights prior. Only this time, I, for whatever reason, decided to look out of the window, and when I look out the window, I see her once again. But this time she's closer to my house. She's practically right outside my bedroom window, just standing there still, watching me. This honestly like terrified me to the point that I ended up calling the cops, because I honestly didn't know what else to do. But when the cops showed up, there was no trace of her. It was as if she had never been there. I honestly felt like I was starting to lose my mind. I didn't want to tell my husband about anything that was going on because I just felt like he was under so much stress at his new job and the move and everything. And I honestly, like, half of me wanted to believe that I was imagining all of this, so I didn't want him to think I was crazy. So instead, I told him that I wanted to go spend some time with my mom. My mom lived a few towns over in a completely different house. I told him that I wanted to spend time with my mom because I needed some help with the baby at night, and he agreed. The moment I got to my mom's house, I told her everything. Thinking that she was just gonna judge me, she didn't. She just silently like sat there and listened to me, and then she grabbed her rosary and began to pray. A few nights after being at my mom's house, nothing really happened, so I was really starting to believe that I probably had imagined the whole thing, that I was perfectly okay, until one night around midnight, I happen to get up, I have to go use the bathroom. I'm in the bathroom, and out of nowhere I get that same gut-wrenching feeling that I have felt before. I automatically like jumped up and went to check on my baby. Only this time, when I went to check on my baby, I opened the bedroom door and there is a woman standing right next to his crib. The same woman that I had seen staring at my window at the other house. I'm too terrified to even move. This woman was standing right next to the baby's crib, kind of like bent over, caressing my baby's face. No matter how terrified I was, I feel like my motherly instincts kicked in, or my instincts to want to protect my baby kicked in, and somehow I gathered all the courage that I could possibly gather, and I walked up to this thing and I asked, "What do you want?" With tears streaming down her face, she kind of looked up and said, "Where are my children? I'm looking for my children." Then she looked back at my son and said, I thought he was mine. And I looked at her and I said, no, that's my son. That's not your son. He's mine. She just stood there, like she wouldn't leave, still like sobbing, like completely sobbing. Part of me was still trying to like rationalize all of this. Like I'm still like just praying that maybe I'm just imagining all of this, that this isn't actually happening, until I hear my mom running through the bedroom door. She had heard me yelling at this woman. My mom was holding this long chain of garlic, like garlic put together, and she started hitting La Llorona with it, yelling at her to leave. This is when I snapped out of it and realized that no, my mom can see it too, that this is actually happened. This is real life. La Llorona then, it was almost like she turned into a shadow and just disappeared into the corner of the room, and then she was no longer there. That night, my mom and I couldn't sleep, the baby couldn't sleep. We were up praying all night. We were terrified. That morning, I ended up calling my husband and telling him everything, and I finally had to like come clean. And now that I had my mom as a witness to back up my story, I didn't feel so crazy. I thought that was going to be the end of the story until about 5 years go by. My son is now a 5-year-old boy, and he begins to ask about his other mom. He begins to say, I know you're my mom, but I have another mom. I have 2 moms. Where's my other mom? And I begin to ask him, what are you talking about? I'm your other mom. He goes, no, my other mom has long black hair and she wears a long white gown. Where is she? We ended up taking him to a therapist to try to like get his mind off of it and forget, but that didn't work. So we ended up taking him to a curandero who had to perform multiple limpias. A ton of limpias in order to cleanse my son to the point where he finally forgot that woman ever even existed. It has now been 30 years since this all took place. My son is now an adult and he has no memory of any of that happening, but we definitely remember. So was it a long lost spirit, or did I actually encounter La Llorona?
Something that looked exactly like my mom came into my bedroom, but it wasn't her. Scary story time. About 7 years ago, when I was 16, something happened that I still can't explain. At the time, my mom and stepmom had bought a multi-family home together. My bedroom was in the attic on the 3rd floor, directly across from my sister's room. It was a Saturday morning and I was lying in bed scrolling through my iPad when I suddenly heard heavy footsteps sprinting up the stairs. Not normal footsteps. Whoever or whatever it was sounded like they were running as fast as they could. I dropped my iPad and stared at my bedroom door, waiting to see whether they were coming to my room or my sister's room. Then my bedroom door slammed open. Standing in the doorway was my mom. She was wearing her favorite vintage red nightgown, fuzzy slippers, and her hair looked exactly the way it had always been when she first wakes up. But something was horribly wrong. Her face was twisted with an anger I had never seen before. Without hesitation, she started yelling at me. The strangest part was that it sounded like she was speaking English, but I couldn't understand a single word. It wasn't another language, and it wasn't muffled. It sounded exactly like English, yet every sentence came out as complete gibberish. Thinking maybe I had done something wrong, I apologized and asked her to repeat herself. She became even angrier and yelled again. Yet still, I couldn't understand a single word. At this point, I felt awful because I could tell she was upset, but I genuinely had no idea what she was trying to say. I asked her one more time to repeat herself. She let out an irritating growl, threw her arms down in frustration, spun around, and sprinted back downstairs. I immediately jumped out of bed and followed after her, convinced something serious had happened. I followed the footsteps all the way downstairs into the living room, and that's when I froze. My mom was already sitting on the couch. She was wearing blue sweatshorts and a gray tank top, calmly drinking her coffee. She looked up at me, smiled, and casually asked, "Morning, how'd you sleep?" Completely confused, I asked her what was wrong. She looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" I asked why she changed her clothes so quickly. Her expression shifted from confusion to concern. She told me she hadn't changed clothes at all. She'd been sitting there drinking coffee the entire time. I told her everything that had just happened. At the time, she insisted I'd probably been dreaming or was still half asleep. She kept telling me it couldn't have been real, and eventually asked me to stop talking about it altogether. For years, that's exactly what I believed. Then, about a year ago, I brought it up again. This time, my mom admitted something she never told me before. She said she'd believed me the whole time. The reason she'd brushed it off was because the thought that something could perfectly copy the way she looked and even slammed my bedroom door open terrified her so much that convincing herself it wasn't real was easier than accepting the alternative. To this day, I have no explanation for what walked into my bedroom that morning, but whatever it was, it looked just like my mom. And that's the end of the story. So have you ever experienced something trying to pretend to be somebody you know? Let me know.
I need your help with something that's been extremely frustrating. 2 days ago, I went to go start up a YouTube channel, and that's when I found out that there are 2 other YouTube channels that are using my content and impersonating me. This is not a fan account. They do not have my permission to upload my videos, use my stories, or use themselves as a representation as my channel. Through the span of starting my entire TikTok, I've spent hours reading these stories, editing them, uploading them, so it's extremely discouraging that somebody feels like that they can go and take the credit for it on YouTube. I've already started the process of reporting them for copyright infringement and impersonation, but I could still definitely use your help if you come across this fake channel. It would mean the world to me if you were to report it. I don't need you to engage or leave any nasty comments or things like that. I just want it to be reported through YouTube's reporting system. Okay, so this is one of the accounts that is pretending to be me. Not me. I know it looks like me, but they're stealing my videos and my content. They haven't posted in a while, but it's still annoying. This is the other one that is pretending to be me. They are actively posting, literally posted a video that I made last night onto their page, pretending to be me. As you can see, it has 2 E's at the end. That's how you know it's not my real account. This is a fake account. They are using AI for my thumbnails. Not me, fake account. This one is actually me. I just started 2 days ago, so I have 6 subscribers, and my name is correctly spelled. That is my account. At the end of the day, I really do just want to thank everybody who supports After Dark Hotline. Like, this exists only because of you guys. So I really appreciate you, and I appreciate all of your support and all of your comments. I wouldn't have been here if it wasn't for you guys, so thank you.
According to a couple that was traveling through the Appalachian Mountains in the late 1980s, they may have accidentally stumbled across something that the Cherokee warned us about centuries ago. And I'm talking about the Moon-Eyed People. And after hearing their story, I don't think that I'll ever look at cave systems the same way ever again. Now, before I tell this story, as always, there is no absolute way for me to verify it, so take it as entertainment, but you decide. It was sent to me by a follower who claims that they heard it years ago from some relatives. So take it as entertainment, like I said, and you make the decision. Now, according to the story, a married couple was driving through western North Carolina during the fall of 1988. And they had spent the whole day sightseeing around small mountain towns, and, they were planning to cut through the back road toward Georgia before finding a motel for the night, right? They were trying to take the path less traveled. But they said sometime along the drive, they took a wrong turn. And they ended up miles from anywhere where they were supposed to be, right? There was no gas stations, no houses, no traffic, just winding roads that were disappearing deeper and deeper into the mountains. And eventually they decided to pull over near an old overlook to stretch their legs and kind of regain their composure. And it was close to midnight at the time, and the moon was nearly full. And according to the husband, the woods felt unusually alive. Not like noisy and like animal noises. He said it was very aware. Like something knew that they were there, right? Other than the typical wildlife. The wife wandered a short distance away, and she noticed what looked like a narrow opening in the side of a rocky hillside. And at first she assumed it was like an abandoned mine or something like that. But as they got closer, they realized it was a cave entrance. And that's when she saw a movement just beyond the shadows. And at first she thought maybe it was a deer or some other type of animal. And then she realized whatever she was looking at was standing upright, and it was watching her, just watching them. And she called her husband over, and they both saw it at the same time. And then another and another came out, and now there were these 3 figures standing partially concealed near the cave entrance. And she said that they looked kind of human, but not entirely. They were very, very small. She said no bigger than like 4 feet, if that. Their skin was unnaturally pale, almost like white, like that translucent white. And they had very long facial hair despite appearing youthful at the same time. But the thing that they remembered most was these creatures' eyes. They were very large and very round and very, very, very blue, like like reflecting the moonlight, almost like an animal's eyes, is how she explained it. And the husband later described them as looking almost painful, and as if the daylight would have burned them. Now, nobody spoke, nobody moved, not even these things, and the three figures simply just stood there and stared at them, blinking very slowly and studying the couple. Then, according to the husband, one of them stepped backward into the cave system, and then another one followed before disappearing, and then another one before completely disappearing. And one last figure came out, and it was remaining standing there for about several seconds longer. And they said that it tilted its head slightly, almost like curiously, like it was trying to figure them out as well. And then, just like the other three, it took a step back and it vanished into the darkness. The couple reportedly ran back to their car and they drove until they reached a motel just before sunrise. The next morning, they told an elderly local woman what they had seen the night before. And she reportedly became very, very quiet, and she just asked, like, were their eyes very blue? Were they very pale? And the couple was like, yeah, oh my God, yeah, and they nodded, and she just quietly added, she's like, yeah, my grandmother used to warn us about them all the time. And she told them how the Cherokees spoke of another people long before Europeans arrived that were very small, very pale, bearded, and they were only able to travel at night because their eyes couldn't tolerate the strong rays of the sunlight. And she said they were called the moon-eyed people. And according to the legend, after losing a conflict centuries ago, they began to retreat into the caves, and they scattered all throughout North Carolina and parts of northern Georgia. And the woman reportedly ended the conversation by simply saying that, something that the husband never forgot about their encounter was pretty much people think that they're gone, but if they only come out at night, how would anyone truly know if they're here or not? Now, obviously, there's no proof of any of this or that any of this ever happened, but it's interestingly enough that there is a mysterious 3-foot-tall statue discovered in the mid to late 1800s near the Hiawassee River that some researchers believe may depict the legendary moon-eyed people that the Cherokees spoke about. So tell me what you think. Did this couple simply see cave dwellers in the moonlight, or did they accidentally encounter something that the Cherokee have remembered for nearly 1,000 years? Or was it a crackhead? Tell me what you guys think.
I have a camera in my backyard for both safety reasons and because I'm curious about the wildlife around my house. I live out in the woods at the top of a hill. One night, my camera picked up this strange figure. I should mention, the ashes of the lady who lived here before me were spread on the property. This photo was taken in 2023. At the time, I didn't even have a TV in my room, so it's not a reflection from my TV. I was trying to get some photos of the sunset, and in one of those photos, I saw something terrifying seemingly standing right behind me and looking right at me. I took this picture in room 502 of Waverly Hills Sanatorium while I was on a tour of the facility during the evening. This was caught about 6 years ago at a library in Pittsburgh that my team and I fundraise for. Several psychics have told us that this library is haunted. Recently, I was here with my son, who told me he was playing hide and seek with a woman. At the time, though, there were no women inside the building.
Get ready with me while I tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. A few years back, I was maybe 13 at the time. I was into paranormal stuff, etc. So one day, me, my brother, and my best friend Matt decided to meet. We gathered at my best friend's place. We watched movies, played video games, and my brother, with a calm voice, said, "Let's go outside." It was 1 a.m. Why would y'all need to be outside at 1 o'clock in the morning? Why would you need to be outside at 1 o'clock in the morning? There's no reasoning, there's no need. You don't need to be outside at 1 o'clock in the morning. I had chills all over my body. He would never say that kind of stuff. He's actually scared of the dark. Absolutely not. Someone that you know very well is all of a sudden acting out of character in the middle of the night? No. I said no, but Matt agreed with a smile on his face. I didn't want to stay alone, so I went with them. Randomly, my brother got his camera out of his backpack and started filming. I told him to put the camera down, but instead, he slapped me to the ground. What? What is happening? I was so scared. There was no light, and now I'm just laying on the ground. At this point, it's about 2 in the morning, and my brother got really aggressive. Matt tried to calm him down, but it didn't work. As my brother was filming, he pointed the camera to an abandoned house that we lived nearby, and what we saw was something that I don't ever want to see again. It was so terrifying that at that point, my brother did calm down. The house we were looking at was down the street, and really the only thing that surrounded it was a bunch of tall grass. That's it. After we all swore we saw something, he played the footage back. We all watched. Once we saw it again, that's when my brother started screaming at me and Matt to run the fuck away and get home. What did you see? What did you see? Oh, we didn't argue. Both of us just started sprinting home. Once we all got there, we sat down and my brother replayed the footage for us so that we could get a really good look at what it was that we saw. It was tall. A tall, white figure with no face, staring at all of us, and then slowly walking away. Stop. I don't think I mentioned this before, but we were looking inside the abandoned house. So this tall, white, ghostly figure with no face was looking out at us. Oh, absolutely not. I have the chills. I have the chills, but this is the sort of ghost capture that I want to get at least once in my life. I think that is just peak like ghost capture. I don't know. It's creepy, but I also love the idea of it. At this point, it's 3 or 4 in the morning and I cannot stop thinking about this man. But not because I was so freaked out. It was because I could have sworn I had seen him somewhere else. Oh, stop. Stop it right now. The thought was bothering me so bad, and it was so late, and then it came to me. When I was around 10 or 11 years old, I was walking through this yard to get to my best friend's house. It was a shortcut at the time. As I was walking by, I was looking inside the house because the windows on it were large. It was kind of hard to miss, to be completely honest. But I noticed that the house was completely empty, so I just kept moving. At the instant that I turned my attention off of the house, I heard 3 taps coming from the other side of the window. The taps weren't small either. They were loud and they sounded aggressive. So of course, as an 11-year-old kid, I started crying because I was so scared. And then I started running for my life. Me and you too, girl. You are not going to catch me sticking around to find out what the heck made those taps. Absolutely not. I am getting out of there. Because the grass was so tall at the time, I couldn't see the ground. But in that grass was a hole that my foot went in and I got hurt. Oh, so now you're trapped in this tall grass right next to this creepy abandoned house. Right. No, got it. I couldn't walk. I was completely frozen. That's when I heard it rustling in the grass near me. And when I woke up, I saw it. The tall, white, faceless figure walking right past me. Eventually, my best friend got worried and came looking for me and found me in the grass with my hurt leg and was able to help. I haven't seen that figure since that day out with my brother and Matt, and I really hope I don't ever see it again.
This was one of the worst medical disasters in history, but a lot of people don't know about it. Before Chernobyl, so I actually do know about it, and that's because the person who made that video was me. I know I look a little different since then, and that's because I have evolved into an ancient Aries goddess. And just in case you don't know, the Aries is a ram, so I am a ram. Duh. Despite how I might look, I'm actually on the side of the light, especially women. The patriarchy, one true crime story at a time. The media told you that the story of Lorena Bobbitt was about a spicy Latina who snapped, and it's easy to write this off as a cautionary tale of a woman scorned and the power of feminine rage. But it's so much more than that. What it actually is a case study in how the media frames female rage versus male violence. It's also a story about betrayal, personal betrayal from a man who assaulted the woman he was supposed to cherish. Betrayal from the story of marriage, betrayal from the perception of what each of these people thought that marriage was supposed to be for them, and institutional betrayal from every system that was supposed to protect Lorena Bobbitt, but instead they looked the other way. And that is the story we're telling today. But if this is your first time here, you probably want to know who's telling you this story.
Have you ever heard of the shoebox telephone game? It's creepy. You essentially make this homemade little telephone and contact someone who has passed away, someone that you know. It's one of those internet creepy games and rituals, but some people have tried it and had crazy experiences. And sometimes those are really paranormal, scary experiences. Again, this is one of those situations where you are trying to contact someone from beyond the veil. And sometimes that might work, or sometimes you might contact something that you didn't mean to contact. Jess and I get into how this game works, how to do it, in one of our recent podcast episodes on Just a Little Stitious, but we also have a story of someone who tried it. They literally wind up having the most wild experience.
So the point of this ritual is to essentially contact a deceased loved one. It is possible to dial a wrong number. When this happens, you may be connected to someone or something that you did not intend to, and this someone or something could pretend to be the right person and harass you, and just, it wouldn't be a good time. The game was already being played by many people in a juvenile detention center before the person who seems to have shared it online got there to the detention center. Many of the participants were kids who didn't have one or both parents. The game may have offered some sort of comfort. In some cases, though, it made things worse instead of helping. It is generally considered a low stakes game compared to something like the Three Kings ritual or the Man in the Fields ritual. It's also described as being much less intense and dramatic overall. It's often seen as a good starter game for beginners. To some, it's a dip your toes in the water type of ritual. It's a way to call the shadow side. Shit you need. A phone booth, which can just be like a closet, a handset, which is basically a paper cup, a telephone box, which is a shoebox, literally, a telephone wire made from regular string. Sewing thread works best. You'll need about 2 to 4 feet of this string plus a needle to attach everything, a pair of scissors, something strong to power the box, as in a power object, something that has a personal connection to whoever you're trying to contact. That part is very important. Ritual setup.
Anyone else see paranormal stuff as a kid and your parents try to convince you it's all a dream, but even as adults, you know there was something more to it than that? When I was 3 years old, I was living in this second floor of an apartment. It was just me and my mom and my dad, okay? And one night I wake up and I look out the window because I heard some ruffling going on, all right? It's the middle of the night and I see the trash man. Now, I'm only 3, so I don't really have the cognition to understand what a trash man is, but I see the guy in a giant truck. He's picking up the trash. He's putting it in the truck, and I'm just kind of enamored with it. So I'm just staring at the guy, right? And then the guy kind of notices me, and he tilts his head all the way up to the window, and he grins as big as he can. And that's when I see he doesn't have a face. Yeah, no face. There was a face there, but it was burnt off entirely. And no, I don't mean burn victim. I mean, imagine you put a hot dog on a grill for a year, okay? Completely pitch black with flaking dust coming off of it and chipping everywhere and just looks pretty rough, okay? Something that a human being most likely would not be able to survive, and if they were to, they wouldn't be working, okay? So anywho, this guy looks up at me, he smiles with this really like jagged grin, and his eyes were neon yellow. He had no iris whatsoever. He only had these tiny black beady pupils. So I freak the fuck out, dude. I jump up out of my bed and I go, the trash man's coming to kill me. The trash man's coming to kill. And I'll wake up my parents. They wake up, what's going on? The trash man. And I'm like pointing, and they run out and they look down. There's no trash man there, and our trash is still there. What are you talking about? What happened here? Okay. Quite the thing to just like make up for a kid. And they said it was a dream. You need to go back to bed. You were just having a bad dream, son. You're safe. And so as a little kid, you trust your parents with almost everything. And so you're like, okay, I guess I'm having a bad dream. And so I go back to bed. Well, then a couple nights later, he's out again. I look down. He looks up. He grins. I run back. The trash man's coming. She goes over. There's no trash man out there. And at this point, I'm pissing my father off, right? Like, you don't wake my dad up, okay? So he's angry. Then they get into an argument. So I'm just in here causing drama in my house at this point. And so I slowly over time stop saying something about it. And I just don't look out the window when I wake up in the middle of the night and I hear things. Now, however, one night, there's a thunderstorm. I hear the ruffling down there though, and I know the difference between the thunder, and I'm like, oh, I think he's down there. So I'm petrified. So what I did was I chose to not look out directly. I chose not to look down, right? So I'm in my bed and I'm just looking out the window, right? I'm staring at the tops of trees and there's like a wide open area. I'm watching the rain come down and the lightning cascade in the background, and then a lightning flashes and he's in my window. He's in my window, just grinning at me, dude. So he had to be fucking floating, right? And so that's when I stopped looking out of the window for the rest of my life. And I would constantly tell my parents during the daytime, so I didn't cause any issues, trash man was back again last night. I heard him. The trash man, I felt him in my window. I saw him in my window. I don't look out my window anymore. The trash man's always there. So yeah. My mom to this day says it was all a dream. I don't know where you came up with this notion. You came up with this whole character in your head. I've drawn him before on paper somewhere. It's absolutely terrifying, right? But yeah, anybody else had this happen to them? I do have one other thing that happened along those lines in my room that wasn't the trash man, and he wasn't coming after me. So if you want to hear that story, follow for part 2. My name's RJ. I tell stories on here every day, and if you like that kind of thing,
listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me give you guys a story time of this girl who had a jealous friend. We're gonna call the girl that told me this Pinkies, and we're gonna call her friend Best Friend, okay? So Pinkies and Best Friend had been friends since they were in high school, whatever. They finished high school, went to varsity together, and then they finished, they both graduated or whatever. Now, Pinkies, guys, is very smart. She's an engineer, okay? And as for Best Friend is a teacher. But guys, a degree is a degree. At the end of the day, you work hard, you got it. It doesn't matter about who is what or what. At the end of the day, you got it. It's not everybody that gets to your level. But Best Friend, guys, could not contain her jealousy. Pinkies is like, okay, fine, she works in the engineering field, fine, everything is cool, everything is calm. Best Friend is somebody that is always, guys, talking about marriage, she's talking about kids, she's this. Pinkies is not there. So she's like, one day they had a company, what, and they were meeting other companies, and that's where she met her husband. Pinkies met the man of her dreams. They started dating. The guy was an engineer as well, but he was in a better position, so he had money, and it was just a beautiful thing. Best Friend acted like she was happy this entire time, but she really wasn't. Okay, fine. I think after 2 years, Pinky's boyfriend decided it's time for me to get married. It's time for us to do the thing. Pinky is like, she was excited. She tells best friend, listen, the boy sent a letter to my family, so I'm getting married. Are you excited for me, friend? Baby girl's like, yes, I'm excited for you, blah, blah, blah. Now, everything made sense to Pinky's when she found out the truth, right? Fine. She's like, on the day of her lobola, her and Pinkies were supposed to be wearing something similar, but she was obviously the girl that's getting lobola, so she was going to wear a nice dress, that shows that she is the bride, and she's getting her dowry paid, and she's a traditional bride, right? And then Pinkies was supposed to wear something similar to show like their union, because she really loved this friend, y'all. On the day of the wedding, Pinkies is nowhere to be found. So they had a whole thing, like a whole celebration for this lobola, right? They had a tent outside, they had things. Pinky's nowhere to be found. She calls Pinky's because there are pictures that they need to take together. Pinky's nowhere to be found. How? Okay, fine. She calls best friend. Best friend is nowhere to be found. Fine. They set aside, they pay the dowry or whatever. They sit in the tent, and people are celebrating. It's nice, whatever. Out of nowhere, it starts raining heavily at that. It rains to the point whereby the chairs are here, the water, like that. I can't even show you. Say for example, these were the chairs. This is how tall the chairs were. The water was here. The people are sitting here. The water is over here. The water is drowning everything. The tent is floating, guys. The food is on the floor. How they don't know. That rain was heavy, real heavy. So now things are ruined. People are putting their feet on the table because the water is so bad. Eventually, I don't know who, Pinky's husband, right, called somebody, and they came and they drained the water. For some reason, it was raining, but it was only in Pinky's yard where the water was drowning stuff. And obviously people are like, this is definitely witchcraft. People are jealous out here, but they never thought that the snake is slithering very close to you. So Pinky's is
might have known the story of real life boogeyman.
It's like, they drained the water, whatever. The celebration continues, but like it was ruined. People were unable to eat. They had to order food that was already prepared, but it's fine. The celebration continued, right? Fine. Okay, fine. Pinky decides to call best friend later on that day, and best friend answers, and she's like, hey Chomi, are you okay? What's going on? How was the wedding? And Pinky is like, no, like I'm okay, but why didn't you come? Like, what happened? Best friend is like, I had a thing where I needed to go out of the country. When has it ever happened that a teacher needs to go out of the country? But that's what she said. And she was like, she needed to go out of the country for one day or whatever. And so she's on her way back to South Africa. And so Pinky is like, hi, that's crazy. Like, but then why didn't you tell me? She's like, I couldn't tell you. It was something that was abrupt. Fine. Now best friend is asking something which should have been a red flag to Pinky's, right? So she's like, how was the wedding? I heard there was rain. Are you guys okay? Did any of you survive? Was there like just saying things like she was there, like you guys drowned. Did anything happen? And so Pinky's is like, what? Like, how do you know that? Because I thought you said that you were out of the country and it's now that you're touching your phone. And she's like, oh, no. Like, yeah, I'm just, yeah. That's exactly how she sounded. And so Pinky is like, hi, Chomi, it's okay. No need to explain. This is what happened, blah, blah, blah. Sharp. Pinky's and her husband go to a traditional healer, and the traditional healer warns Pinky's about this friend of hers. And the traditional healer was very specific. It said, you have a very close friend, and that close friend is not happy for you. Pinky's guys decided not to listen to the traditional healer because she's like, that's her friend. In reality, Pinky's is like that, guys. She gives people the benefit of the doubt. That girl is too nice. Fine. The traditional healer warned her. She didn't listen. Fine. It was the day of her white wedding, Moss. It rained a little bit, and then the rain stopped. We were all panicking, like, we're about to drown again. It stopped. Sharple, the wedding stops, whatever. We had a after party when the wedding was done and the speeches and everything was done, and we were going inside a hall. We are inside the hall, guys. It's nice. A fight started. Mid after party, a fight started. People were throwing chairs at each other. People were fighting for some reason, and the two people that were fighting, one of them died. The wedding ended in blood, and the police were called. We were all standing outside. We don't know what happened. Now we need to testify. Like, it was not cute. And Pinky's and best friend was there now. Best friend was there this time, guys. And she disappeared when all of this started. She wasn't anywhere near Pinky's to kind of comfort her or anything. And again, Pinky's called this girl like, where were you? Blah, 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 blah. And again, best friend gave her an excuse, sharp. The day that Pinky's realized that this person is not good for her and this person is really trying to ruin her life was when she fell pregnant, y'all, and it was blissful, whatever. The husband was excited. She fell pregnant with twins. And best friend gave her waist beads because she was like, it looks nice on a pregnant belly. She was supposed to have a pregnancy photo shoot and best friend gave her waist beads. And things went south. That was the clear indication that this person is not good for you. So fine, Pinky's just did her pregnancy photo shoot, and after that pregnancy photo shoot, things went south, y'all. She started having depression to the point where she wanted to leave her job, she wanted to leave her husband, she wanted to leave her marriage. People kept on telling her that it was because of the pregnancy, and she was like, it was not the pregnancy. Pinky's was so good at her job that her boss eventually gave her leave. Even before her maternity leave started, it was like, I want to go home, fix your life, and then come back when you're okay. She was probably 7 months, I think, at that time, and she wanted to leave her husband. She moved back home, y'all. And the husband used to force her to go to a traditional healer, but she refused because she was like, no. And the only person that she was listening to was Pinky's. Of course, that was an indication. And one day, the mom decided it's enough, and she lured her to the mall where they found her husband. And then her husband was waiting for her at the mall, right? And they took her to a traditional healer, and they got there, guys. And when they got there, the traditional healer burned something, and Pinky's fell unconscious. She fell, guys. And the traditional healer was like, yeah, this is because whatever that was happening to her is now does not have power anymore. That's why, like, now that she fell, this is her spirit giving in. We need to work. They worked on her, guys. For 2 days they were working on her. After that, she woke up, right? She did fall unconscious, and then she woke up, and then they worked on her for 2 days. She stayed at the traditional healer, and then after that, the traditional healers told her, stay away from that best friend of yours. That person doesn't wish you well. She's mad that you were working as an engineer. She's mad that you will have a husband. She's mad that you are pregnant. She's just mad, and she's jealous of you. If you don't stay away from this person, one day she's going to kill you. I promise you. And she's like, unfortunately, she had power to take one of your babies away, but we got her spirit back because she wanted to use that baby to torment you, right? And she was like, and the traditional healer was like, after this, go to the hospital, and you should expect that one of the babies is not alive. And for sure, guys, Pinky's went to the hospital, and she found out that one of her babies is not alive. And so she needed an emergency C-section. The other one needed to be in NICU, and the other one needed to be buried. And best friend never showed face after that because I think she knew she got caught. They never spoke again with best friend, y'all. Stay away from evil friends that you can see want your life. Because I understand that jealousy is a thing. We all are jealous, guys, to some degree. But to now want to ruin your friend's life just because it's their turn. What?